And speaking of people, the United Nations, people uniting in a cause. Did you have the Justice for Leroy sign got confiscated at SmackDown? The
What?
guy
I don't know anything about this. No.
he tweeted me a picture, and damn it, and I lost the I didn't lose the tweet. I lost track of the tweet on the screen of the thing, and I couldn't write. But you know who you are. Nobody else does. You probably need to keep it that way. But a guy took a Justice for Leroy side, took a picture of it, and then reported back that it was not allowed. I don't know if confiscated is the right word. They apparently, I don't know what they thought it might have been. They
Yeah.
might have thought it might have been justice for the real name of one of their favorite wrestlers that's been f***ed
Listen
around.
to the show. They know exactly what it is.
Well, no, I mean the guard at fucking, the arena in Pocatello. I don't know if they would be that minute to where, somebody would immediately have sent out a bulletin, don't let Justice for Leroy signs up.
You never know. If it's the week that Jim Cornette on his podcast says, I expect to see these signs, that was probably the week you'd put it on the list. Look out for,
Well,
look out for anything that says Kylie Ray or NDA or
or Leroy.
Leroy.
Well, you may be right there, I guess, because what would you have otherwise have said, no, you can't say Justice for Leroy? Because now that I think about it, I don't think any of the wrestlers' real names are Leroy. So it wouldn't have applied really to anything unless they were looking for it, would it?
No. So
Well, anyway, do we know any more about Leroy? Leroy was popular on the Twitter and with the news articles, and people retweeted clips on television and things, and say he's become quite a topic of conversation.
and once these articles started being found by people, and I couldn't believe how many people found things quickly, and then some people found the wrong Leroy. They're like, hey, look, I found
Oh, no.
Leroy. It's like, that's some other guy. I don't know who the fuck that
Did we
is.
slander an innocent Leroy with
No, it was just some generic Leroy, not the Leroy in question.
just regular Leroy?
Regular Leroy. So it was February 1990, and that brought back another few memories of this trip. February 1990, February break from school. Apparently, someone knew that Leroy did it, and he passed away.
Well, and now I guess we should bring again for these
Oh, yeah,
slackers
I
who
guess
have
so,
not
yeah.
been keeping up with the programming. Leroy was a gentleman that Brian knew as a young man in New York that gave him a very beloved floppy hat. It was a noted floppy hat wearer.
He was the freight elevator operator in my family's office building, in the building where
Yeah.
everything was, and he was the nicest, coolest guy. Whenever you're riding a freight elevator, and that's what you do when you're cool and you're a kid, whenever you're riding a freight elevator, Leroy was the coolest guy. Yeah.
Come to find out, years and years earlier, he had murdered somebody. But so now you can pick it up from there with the news story.
Yeah, in 1946, because the way for those who missed the story, my father said goodnight to Leroy, flew down to Florida to join us on vacation. The front page of the paper in Florida the next day was Leroy being arrested. He shot a cop, the first ever African-American police officer in Miami. Leroy
Oh.
shot him, saying apparently he was trying to scare him and shoot over him, but it happened. He ran. People in the community knew it was Leroy. He had a glass eye, I believe, so when people said he had a wandering eye, I mean, everyone knew who it was. And he came up to New York, moved in with his father, never changed his name, never got married, just did everything like...
You could do that in those days before the computer. Just move. You could move on lawsuits. You could move on anything.
So one of the people who knew who he was and saw it happen passed away. And when he did, his widow said, I no longer have the obligation to keep this secret.
Oh, this no good bitch. What?
And she called it into a tip line and said that
Oh.
it was Leroy. And cops from Miami, who didn't have jurisdiction to arrest him, see, I didn't know this part until I read the article, came up to New York in January of 90 to talk to him about it, and he did not hide who he was. Like, he completely admitted who he was. And then when they arrested him, I think he had some cash and some blank checks in his pocket. He was going to go. But in February, they arrested him, and then there was a 1-year battle over extradition to Florida. And his attorney was William Kunstler. I never knew any of this. And eventually they let him go with time served for the 1 year. because it happened so many years earlier, and even the officer's family.
What was the year? Was it 1940 something?
46, and this is 1990. So, I mean,
Jesus.
it's a different world at that point. It's not even just, the years. It's a different world. And the officer's family forgave him. And they realized this is a guy who, again, he was a sweet guy. You can say that about anybody, but was a church-going guy, was a family guy, hardworking guy. And I don't know anything past that point, but it's incredible. And the other thing I remember about this trip, and again, it was always February. It was February 87, I think, when Andy Warhol died. And that was a crazy thing.
Oh, well, everybody remembers
well, again, that was a crazy thing for that vacation for me. But this trip in 1990, on the way back, we hit really bad weather. And my father had come back a day early to get things going. He had to go home. He was waiting at the airport. We never arrived. We had to land in like Michigan. And then we had to fly back again. We landed in Newark, got into the smelliest cab of all time. For the rest of my life, every cab I got into, I expected this smell. And the cab had to take me, my mom, my sister, and 3 other women, all stuffed into this smelly fucking cab.
Oh my God. Well, now, wait a minute. Do you know it was the cab, or were they just these strange women?
Oh, I promise you it was the cab. This was the worst cab of all time. And he had to take us to JFK, where my dad finally met us, took us home. That was the night of Savage versus Hogan, the main event. It was supposed to be Mike Tyson as the referee. Instead, it was Buster Douglas. Yeah. So those are the bookends of my trip. Leroy getting arrested, and Buster Douglas and Hulk Hogan celebrating the defeat of Randy Savage.
I just watched a 3430 or 30 by 30? 3430.
30 for 30.
Or something like that. Well, you never know, on Buster Douglas.
Oh.
And that whole, but his life and etc. He's still around. He said boxing was very, very good to him. Now, anyway, well, it's nice to know that Leroy now is getting a vindication for, laboring in anonymity all those years.
Personally, it's just crazy when we talked about this and someone found a bunch of the articles and there was a picture of him. It's like, holy shit, I haven't seen a picture of him since I was 10 years old. So it was really wild to see this.
Well, now
more of the adventures of the great Brian Last in the future.
Well, thanks for the warning. You're not exactly Tom Sawyer.
Hey.
Maybe
I'm more of a Huck Finn. You're right.
Maybe a Huck fan.